You're a traveler on the Kansas prairie in 1872, and you've just stopped for a hot meal at the only inn for 20 miles. The family that runs it seats you with your back to a canvas curtain. You don't think about the curtain. Why would you? Behind it, someone is already lifting a hammer. In a few seconds, you'll be clubbed through the fabric, dropped through a trap door into a dirt cellar, and buried in the orchard out back. And the people who served you dinner will be eating breakfast at the same table tomorrow. By the time anyone realizes what's been happening on this stretch of trail, the family responsible will already be gone, and they will never be conclusively found. The Bender family arrived on the Kansas prairie in 1870. A father, a mother, a son, and a daughter, all German immigrants, all strangers to everyone around them. They staked a small claim along the Great Osage Trail near Cherryvale in Labette County, and built a single structure roughly 16 by 24 feet, just one room. They called it a grocery and inn, but it made almost no sense as a business. There was barely any foot traffic out here. The family kept odd hours, and the grocery stocked almost nothing worth buying. What the cabin did have was a canvas curtain strung across the middle, dividing the room in half. And that detail alone should have been a warning sign to anyone who stopped there. Nobody treated it as one. Travelers stopped anyway, because it was the only roof for miles in either direction, and because the daughter, Kate Bender, had a reputation that traveled faster than the family's wagon ever could. Kate was a fortune teller. She claimed she could read a traveler's future in their palm, heal the sick, and channel spirits, and she advertised it under her own name in local newspapers as far away as Kansas City. The Benders didn't have to lure anyone in. People came specifically to see her. The victims walked into the one-room cabin on their own, sat down at the family's table, and were told to face away from that canvas curtain. Nobody thought to ask why a one-room inn needed a curtain at all. Investigators would later piece together the mechanics, and it's the kind of detail that makes the case feel less like a murder and more like an assembly line. A guest sat at the table, back to the curtain, while a meal was served. Someone in the family, most likely the father or son, stood behind the fabric with a hammer and struck the back of the skull through the canvas. If that didn't finish the job, Kate or her mother would cut the throat. The body went through a trap door concealed beneath the table, straight down into a dirt cellar dug specifically for that purpose, where the family could rob and strip the corpse without anyone outside ever hearing a sound. From there, it was simple. Drag the body out at night, bury it in the orchard behind the property, and sell the dead man's horse and wagon a county over where nobody would recognize them. The Benders did this, by the most conservative estimates, somewhere between 8 and 12 times over roughly 18 months. Though some contemporary accounts push the number well higher. Nobody noticed for a long time, because nearly every victim was a stranger passing through alone. Exactly the kind of person nobody reports missing for weeks, if ever. One of the few exceptions was a homesteader named George Longcore, who vanished along the trail with his infant daughter in his arms. And even that disappearance didn't raise an alarm fast enough to save the next man who walked through the door. The pattern held until a man named Dr. William York went looking for his brother, who'd vanished on that same stretch of trail. York had money, connections, and a posse. And unlike every previous missing traveler, he had someone actively searching for him from the moment he disappeared. He stopped at the Bender Inn, asked his questions, and left. Then he, too, vanished. That was the mistake the Benders couldn't absorb. York's brother organized a search party and went door to door along the trail, and this time the search had real momentum behind it. Leading the effort was Leroy Dick, the local township trustee, a man who had, by his own account, eaten dinner at the Bender table himself, seated with his back to that same curtain, weeks before anyone suspected a thing. When the search party reached the Bender property, the family was gone. The cabin had been abandoned in a hurry. Livestock left behind, no warning given to anyone. Neighbors finally searched the grounds properly. They found the trap door, the blood-stained cellar, and an orchard that turned out to be a mass grave. At least 8 bodies were pulled from that ground, several with their skulls crushed in the exact same place, including, according to most accounts, George Longcore's infant daughter found buried with him. A nationwide manhunt followed almost immediately. Newspapers ran the story coast to coast. The Kansas governor put up a $2,000 reward, and Dr. Cron, York's own family, added another $1,000 on top of it, a combined bounty topping $3,000, an enormous sum for 1873. A private detective named Thomas Beers, hired directly by the York family, joined the local trustee leading the search, while bounty hunters and vigilante pauses chased leads of their own for years. None of it produced a confirmed capture. The Benders had a head start of several days before anyone realized they were gone, and in 1870s, Kansas, several days on horseback was enough to disappear completely in any direction, with no telegraph line fast enough to catch them. For decades afterward, women across the country were investigated, detained, and sometimes assaulted by mobs on nothing more than a rumor that they were Kate Bender. Not one of those identifications ever held up under real scrutiny. The family that ran an assembly line of murder out of a one-room cabin walked away clean, and the case has never been officially closed. What makes the Bender case different from most unsolved 19th century crimes isn't the body count. It's how little anyone actually knew about the people responsible, even after the bodies were found. Investigators couldn't even confirm the family's real names, let alone their fate. Some researchers believe the Benders weren't blood relatives at all, but an arrangement of convenience between unrelated criminals posing as a family, which would explain how cleanly they vanished, with no real hometown to trace and no actual relatives to track down. It's worth saying plainly that this theory is unproven. It's a working explanation for the case's loose ends, not a confirmed fact. One persistent rumor holds that the Benders were caught within weeks by a vigilante posse and killed quietly. No trial, no formal identification. If that's true, the official manhunt spent years chasing people who were already dead. There's no solid evidence for this rumor either. It's simply one more story that grew in the space the Benders left behind. More than a century and a half later, no remains tied to Kate, her parents, or her brother have ever been conclusively identified. The orchard eventually gave up its dead. The family that put them there never did. This has been Grim Feed. If unsolved disappearances are your thing, the Radium Girls episode covers a very different kind of horror. One where the danger wasn't hiding behind a curtain. It was something workers were told to trust. Subscribe if you want more of these.